TK friends, do you know who this is? It's Curious George. Curious George is here to help us celebrate Earth Day. In honor of Earth Day, he decided that it was a good idea to plant a seed. Right, George? Curious George was so excited to plant a seed, but sometimes his ideas don't always turn out so great. Let's read the story to find out what happened to Curious George, okay? Curious George plants a seed. A level 1 reader. This is Curious George. And this is his friend, the man in the yellow hat. I see that Curious George is pointing to a little seedling growing up out of the ground. Let's open up the book to find out more. Curious George plants a seed. Jumpy Squirrel was very busy. George was curious. What was Jumpy doing? What do you think Jumpy was doing? I see him digging a hole in the ground. Bill, the boy next door, told George, Jumpy buries acorns and nuts. He stores them in the ground. He can dig them up later when he is hungry. Oh, so Jumpy Squirrel buries nuts in the ground and then he can dig them up later to eat. That sounds like a good idea for a squirrel. Well, that gave George a great idea. George buried the orange juice. He buried the butter. He buried the bread. He was so glad to find a good place to store his food. And here is George burying all of the food out of the house. Here he's burying the butter, and here's a banana. Silly George. And the orange juice, and the bread. What is he burying over here? Some more fruit? George, is that where we're supposed to keep our food? I don't think so. When the man with the yellow hat came home, the kitchen was empty. Where was all of their food? And look at Curious George's face. How is he feeling? He has a big smile on his face. I think he's feeling pretty proud of himself. But the man in the yellow hat, look at his face. He's thinking, where did all of the food go? George proudly showed his friend. He's pointing out the window. And what do you see out the window, boys and girls? I see lots of holes in the garden. Let's count how many holes he dug. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I think there might even be another one over there. George, orange juice and bread are not for burying, the man with the yellow hat said. They cannot be stored in the ground. Oh dear, George was confused. His friends showed George a peanut with a sprout. George was puzzled. That means he was a little confused. See, here is the peanut, and it's growing a little tiny plant out of the top. This peanut grew into a plant, the man said. Seeds and nuts grow out of the ground if they are not eaten first. Oh, look, George looks surprised. George thought he understood. If a little peanut could become a big plant, what would a rubber band become? Look at George. He's imagining that a little tiny rubber band could get put in the ground and it could grow into a big giant inner tube for floating in the ocean. Curious George. Is that how it works, TK friends? No. Here he's imagining something else. What would a feather become? He's imagining if you planted a feather in the ground, it would grow into a beautiful peacock. Is that how it works? No, silly George. George dug lots of holes, and he buried lots of things. Oh no, look what he's burying now. He buried an umbrella, and it looks like he buried a stool or a chair. Oh my goodness. Soon the house was empty. The man with the yellow hat was surprised. Make your surprised face. Are you ready? Do you look surprised just like the man in the yellow hat? I would be surprised if I came home and all of my things were buried out in the front yard. I don't think I would be too happy about it. George, umbrellas and chairs are not for burying, said the man with the yellow hat. They are made by people. They are not going to grow. Seeds and nuts will grow. Curious George does not look so proud and happy right now. And the man with the yellow hat doesn't look too happy either. He has his shovel. I wonder what he's going to do with it. What would you do with it, friends? A few days later, George saw something new in the yard. It was a sprout. Look, George, said his friend, a seed you buried is growing. I wonder what it will be. And what did George do to help that seed grow? He gave it a little bit of water out of a watering can. Now that's something you can do to help seeds grow. Soon there was a beautiful sunflower in the yard. George had a green thumb after all. And that doesn't mean his thumb was actually green. You can tell someone they have a green thumb if they're good at growing plants, like flowers or vegetables or even a beautiful tree. Someone who has a green thumb is what we say if someone is good at gardening. So at the end of the story, Curious George learned what types of things you can plant and grow. Do you remember the 2 types of things that the man in the yellow hat said you can plant and grow? I think he said you can grow nuts and seeds. And here's Jumpy Squirrel. He looks happy at the end of the story too. That's the end of Curious George Plants a Seed. Curious George, did you learn something from your story today? I hope you did. Curious George, are you going to go bury the milk and the bread and the butter tomorrow? I hope not. What a mess you made. Did you and the man in the yellow hat get all those groceries dug up out of the ground? Okay, Curious George, it was fun hanging out with you today. Happy Earth Week, Curious George. See you later. Goodbye.